we differ genetically by only just over 1%. And so why it should be seen as so extraordinary that they would also share our emotions and our intellectual abilities, I'm not sure.
Anthropologist Dr. Jane Goodall today on Now I've Heard Everything. I'm Bill Thompson. Today, July 14th, is World Chimpanzee Day. And it's not just some random day they picked. July 14th, 1960, was the day that Dr. Jane Goodall arrived in Tanzania to begin her groundbreaking work studying chimpanzee life. And today, she is widely recognized as the world's foremost authority on chimpanzees. And the story goes, it all started when she was a child, when her father gave her a stuffed animal, a toy. Instead of a teddy bear, he gave her a stuffed chimpanzee, and that inspired her. Now, in 1990, Jane Goodall wrote a memoir, an autobiography, that she called Through a Window. And it was when she was on a book tour promoting it that I had a chance to meet and spend a few minutes with her. In just a moment, our conversation.
They were prominent then, still prominent now. You're about to hear an interview from radio personality Bill Thompson's 30-year archive. Enjoy.
So here now, from 1990, Dr. Jane Goodall.
You probably had more fun, more adventures, a more enriching life in 30 years with chimpanzees than many people have had in 30 years with a bunch of humans in an office.
I believe so, yes, because the chimpanzees are such unique individuals. They have such wonderful, varied personalities. They each have their own unique life history. And we're still finding things out about them, even after 30 years.
It must take a while to find out things about them because they obviously can't tell you about their relatives. They can't tell you about Aunt Mildred who lives in Phoenix. And you have to learn those things through observation, don't you?
Yes, that's why it's taken such a long time to really come to grips with the essence of chimpanzee social behavior. Because in the first years, although you can say, well, this looks like a mother-child pair and the child is an adult, but it's only after you've watched over a number of years that you know exactly who is related to whom.
There is a very definite social order, isn't there?
Oh, absolutely. It's a male-dominated society, and the males are ordered in a linear hierarchy with usually one up at the top and some poor guy down at the bottom. And then the females, who are all subordinate to all the males, have their own hierarchy, but rather less precise.
Are there still some people, especially in this country where we tend to be skeptical of everything, who don't believe that there is such a hierarchy, that they're just animals? They don't have societies like we do?
I think that is getting more and more scarce. You know, when I began, animals didn't have personalities. They didn't have mind. They couldn't reason. There was no such thing as motivation. In fact, by and large, they were regarded as little machines.
How do you write or how do you do research, though, without attributing too many human characteristics, without anthropomorphizing, and I said that word very carefully?
Well, I typically leave a lot of the deductions to be made by the people reading the book. I've tried always to describe what I see, to write it down objectively. Even though I may be intensely emotionally involved, it's still quite possible with a little self-discipline to write down the facts of the behavior that you're watching.
And from those facts, we can pretty well draw our own conclusions, can't we?
Yes, anybody can draw their own conclusions. In fact, the interesting thing about anthropomorphizing, the scientists studying the biology of the chimpanzee, the physiology, have had no hesitation in describing these incredible similarities between chimpanzee and human brains and central nervous systems and blood and all the rest of it. And we differ genetically by only just over 1%. And so why it should be seen as so extraordinary that they would also share our emotions and our intellectual abilities, I'm not sure.
Does your presence in any way disrupt their society in a way that it wouldn't, and I don't mean disrupt in a negative way, but change it? Does it make a substantive change when a human being is among them?
It doesn't now. There was a time when we fed many bananas, and this gathered an abnormally large number of chimps in one place, all competing for a food that they liked very much and that wasn't plentiful enough to suit their needs. And then there was a very unusual situation. But now, although we still feed a few bananas, it's only once every 2 weeks, and it's only a few. And most people who visit Gombe are very amazed at how the chimpanzees disregard our presence. I mean, they have almost total trust of human observers now.
You found that some are at times carnivorous?
Chimpanzees indeed can hunt very successfully. They show cooperation, and having made a kill, then they will share the prey. That was actually one of the first exciting observations, because up until that time they'd been considered vegetarians.
Does that give you pause to wonder if you're their next meal?
I did wonder about my son when he was a baby, because there are reports of chimpanzees taking human infants. And it's interesting, chimpanzees seem to prefer the flesh of other primates, monkeys, baboons. And right across West and Central Africa, monkeys and chimpanzees are considered favorite food by the African people. Not all of them, but some of them.
How do you separate fact from fantasy when you talk to the tribesmen, the native people who've been dealing with chimpanzees for centuries?
Well, when we first got there, most of what they told us was fancy, although there was a little bit of fact mixed up in it because they didn't watch them. They just saw them fleetingly in the trees. But I think one of the strengths of Gombe research today is that the Tanzanians who work there come from the villages around the park. They don't just do menial tasks, but follow the chimps, write down what they see, use sophisticated tape recorders, and also 8mm video. So they actually care about the chimps just as I do. They talk about them to their families, and there's no way that we're going to have poaching at Gombe.
Are there political problems? We hear in this country so much about what's happening in Africa with the difference between, with the countries trying to make the bridge between ancient tribal traditions and pulling themselves into the 21st century. How does that, or does that affect your work?
I've been incredibly lucky because Tanzania has been perhaps the most politically stable country on the African continent. And they've also had a very good conservation policy over all those years. I mean, gosh, I'm still there after 30 years. However, in other parts of Africa where chimpanzees still remain, there are very major political problems and upheavals and riots that have led to complete disruption of some research projects.
After this short break, Dr. Jane Goodall on being a celebrity.
If you've ever wondered where to find the captivating books we discuss on Now I've Heard Everything, wonder no more.
Just tap the link in our show notes or visit our website, heardeverything.com.
Plus, when you purchase through our affiliate links, you're not only diving into great stories, but also supporting this podcast.
And we thank you for your support.
Now back to my 1990 conversation with Dr. Jane Goodall.
Does this make you uncomfortable coming back and doing the author tour, being interviewed on the media, the bright lights, the microphones, the pencils and papers? Would you rather be back in Gombe?
Well, I'd rather be back in Gombe, but my presence on the media isn't really related just to the book tour. Yes, we need to sell books because it has what I believe is a powerful message. But for the past 3.5, 4 years, I've been far more touring around, talking to people on the media and lecturing about chimpanzees and their plight in the wild and in captivity, because I feel it's time now for me to pay back something to the chimps. You know, they've given me so much over the years, and now they can't speak for themselves. Somebody must speak for them.
Does there reach a point when your own mortality, your own sense of how much you can do comes back to you and you wonder, well, how much longer can I stay over there? Am I going to have to settle down into a real life once again?
Well, normally I don't think about that, but I have to admit that right now, first my voice went, and then I got this corneal ulcer on my eye, and I began to think, golly, am I pushing myself too hard? However, there's so much to be done. By and large, I've been lucky to have a pretty tough constitution, inherited, I think, from my father, and I shall continue.
Are you surprised at your own celebrity?
Well, I don't really think of it. I mean, people keep using this word, celebrity, and I know that people recognize me. They recognize me on the street, and I used to hate that. But now I really understand that the more people recognize me, the more people have heard what I have to say, and therefore I'm pleased about it. But on the other hand, for 50-odd years, I've lived with myself, so I know that I'm just me.
Does it trouble you in any way that people say, that's the chimp lady, isn't it?
Not in the slightest. They sometimes call me the gorilla lady, and I have to point out that Diane Fossey, unfortunately, is not with us any longer.
Lay people, it's just chimp, monkey, ape, gorilla. They're all the same, right?
Soon it won't be like that. I think that with the last National Geographic film, the HBO special, and this book coming out now, and with it an upsurge of Shadow of Man, the children's books I've written, they're getting really popular. And hopefully through our institute, we have a Jane Goodall Institute in Tucson, Arizona, and I think that people are really going to see chimpanzees as chimpanzees and not monkeys, apes, gorillas, and so forth.
Confess to you, I look at all the pictures. I can't distinguish the faces enough to know one from the other. I suppose if you spent 30 years with them, you know one from another, but they do all look alike, don't they?
Well, if somebody goes over to China and sees a whole bunch of Chinese kids, or if a Chinese person comes over here and sees a whole bunch of American kids, or perhaps particularly Swedish, because there is a big ethnic mix in America, they find difficulty identifying them at first, but then they get used to the configuration of the Chinese or the Swedish face, and then you can see the differences. It's the same with chimps.
What fascinating work it must be. Did you ever think that you would be writing 2 books, doing specials on HBO, having an institute? When all this started, what did you dream of eventually?
Well, when I was a child, I had 2 dreams. One was to study animals, work with them, learn about them, preferably in Africa. And the other was to write books about them. So how fortunate I've been that those dreams have come true.
And what a happy person you seem as a result.
Well, happy, yes, except that the plight of chimps in Africa and in captivity does weigh pretty heavy, and there are many, many nights when I can't sleep because the habitat's disappearing, because chimps are hunted for food, because mothers are shot so that their babies can be sold in the market or sold to international dealers. And then in captivity, how do we treat them? Too many zoos are still the old-fashioned, cement-floored, steel-barred prisons. We have circuses. We can go out to a pet store and buy our closest living relative with no proof that we know anything about them and with no commitment to their long-term care, and they can live 50 years. And then to go into the labs, as I have had to in order to be able to speak about the conditions there, some of them, for me, are like journeys into hell. And it doesn't have to be that way. They don't have to be confined singly in tiny, bleak, sterile cages. There are labs doing the same research which have a much more humane attitude. I think that one of the most important lessons that we can learn from the chimpanzees, because we can learn something about our own behavior from them, is the tremendous importance in chimpanzee life of the early experience, the type of mothering the child receives, the experiences that he or she goes through in those first few years. And we now know how significant those early years can be in molding subsequent adult behavior. And if you have a harsh, restrictive mother, you're likely to grow up and have difficulty in forming close personal relationships with other adults. If you have a supportive, affectionate, tolerant mother, then you're likely to be self-confident and play a major role in your society. And it's becoming more and more clear that these kinds of experiences are important for our children too, and that gives one cause for great concern.
Jane Goodall is 91 now, and reportedly, she still has that little toy stuffed chimpanzee that her father gave her. Now, you can get your copy of Through a Window by Dr. Jane Goodall by tapping the link in our show notes, by clicking the link in the description below if you're watching this on YouTube, or by going to our website, heardeverything.com. We may earn an Amazon commission if you make a purchase. Heardeverything.com is where you can also find my 1985 conversation with a Hollywood actress who turned wildlife conservator, Tippi Hedren.
I don't ever look at those cats without thinking how magnificent they are. You know, there is a great deal more to the big cat than being the ferocious animal that we have all been led to believe.
And my 2007 conversation with the widow of crocodile hunter Steve Irwin, Terry Irwin.
He didn't look at an animal and say, that could rip my head off, or, gee, that's the most venomous snake on earth. He appreciated and admired its beauty and its adaptability and just genuinely loved it, and I never saw him scared of anything.
And, of course, we post new episodes of Now I've Heard Everything every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, and you can find us pretty much wherever you find podcasts. And thank you so much for listening. Next time on Now I've Heard Everything, we'll revisit a conversation from some years ago with one of the greatest baseball pitchers of all time. My 1990 conversation with the great Rapid Robert Bob Feller.
What a baseball life was for a kid from Iowa when he's 9 years old, got an autographed ball from Babe Ruth and Lou Gehrig, 1928. I was the youngest pitcher to ever start, win, and complete a major league game.
That's next time on Now I've Heard Everything. I'm Bill Thompson.